They can see me. What do you think? Can you see me? Father wants to give me a little stool. Father, I might fall off it.
Okay.
I'll stay on the ground. Good evening, brothers and sisters. And I'm so happy to be here back in Atlanta. One of the priests today, in a short day we had with priests, said to me, "Do you not remember you came here for the first Eucharistic Congress?" And I didn't. And that's what happens when you're around for a long time. Everybody starts running into each other. But I am delighted, and of course, since the last time I was here, Father Kevin, that I worked with, some of you may remember him. Father Kevin was an Irish Vincentian, and 3 months or 4 months after he was here in Atlanta on our visit in 2018, Father Kevin, just on a Sunday morning, just lay down and died. He wasn't sick. We came back from Germany, but he always prayed. And sometimes, we forget that the Lord takes us serious. And Father Kevin said, "Lord, I don't want to go back to Ireland and retire in an old folks' home. I want to go fast. I don't want to have any trouble. I just want to die in my sleep." Well, he did. And so I didn't have anybody I thought, well, at my age, I'm a long time around. Maybe sometime soon I'll retire. And I don't mean retire from Jesus, because, you take vows of marriage until death doth part. But we take vows and we keep going till we get to heaven. And it's only beginning then. And so you don't retire. I'm always telling the clergy, and say, "Oh, I think I'm going to retire, sister." I said, "Not at all, Father. You can't retire. We never retire from Jesus, right?" But to my pleasant surprise, the Lord sent me not an Irishman, but a Spanish man. Father Pablo, who is from Madrid, the diocesan priest working. He didn't tell you, he worked in the Ukraine. And in fact, he saw many of his co-workers, priests, now in shelters, bomb shelters. And he did a lot through his own, just one email or one WhatsApp to Spain to collect thousands and thousands and send planes to his brothers and the bishops over in the Ukraine through Poland. So it's amazing. He's down in Costa Rica as a missionary, but he's also got permission from his cardinal. We both work together now in parish missions and priest retreats. We leave next week for Germany for a priest retreat and continue all over. And people say to me, "Sister Briege, how do you keep going?" Well, I said, the Lord is getting his own back, because in Atlanta airport, it's a big airport. And when I was with Father Kevin, I was always saying, "Father Kevin, hurry up, put a move on," because he was old and I was younger. And now the tables have turned. I have this young Spanish priest, and I'm saying, "Now, Father, slow down a bit. I'm not 50 or 60, I'm further." But what a joy. Wasn't he beautiful? The way he talks, he spent a lot of time in prayer, and he's been a real blessing in my own life, and I know for many priests and people who have heard him around the world already. Now, tonight, you already met Jesus. We already heard his word and received him in his body and blood. So I just want to prepare you he's going to walk around the church. And sometimes it's good, the best way is like the Acts of the Apostles, to tell you what's happening not 2,000 years ago, but what Jesus is doing today, and why we as Catholics, brothers and sisters, I tell people, why would you need Sister Briege to pray with you or to lay hands on you, when as a Catholic, you have Jesus, body, blood, soul, and divinity. He's a real person. And when Father said about talking to him, I see so many signs and wonders. But I always tell people, healing happens. Every time we pray, Jesus does listen. But sometimes you hear people, and it's like you tell Jesus, or people will say to me, you know, so-and-so was such a holy person and she's really a good person. And they tell you all her attributes and gifts and say, in other words, Jesus has to heal her. And the person doesn't get healed, they die. So what happened? I mean, we sometimes approach prayer as if if you have everything in the right order, the miracle's going to happen. And people come to me and say, Sister Briege, please tell me I'm going to be healed. And when I see parents with sick children or people who are really suffering, and they come to me, and they want me so much to tell them and to pray with them. For example, there have been a lot of people I prayed with over the years, these 50 years almost, who have been healed of leukemia, who've been healed, through different ways, through my speaking about Jesus in the Eucharist, people coming back to the sacraments. And, word spreads. I remember in Ireland, when I went back to Ireland after my own miraculous healing, as you know, I was healed of a very severe form of rheumatoid arthritis when I was a young girl, a young nun. But, when somebody gets healed, everybody rushes to that person and thinks, well, if it happened once, you should be able to do it again. And you kind of think, I had nothing to do with it. I just said a prayer. And it's very easy to have false compassion or sympathy to speak. Because I tell everybody, if I was God, I'd heal the whole lot of you. But I'm only an instrument, I only work for him. But I'm going to tell you 3 beautiful ways that Jesus has taught me over the years of what can happen when you believe. In our travels around the world, Father Kevin and myself, we began many years ago the Eucharistic healing services, because I went to Lourdes after I got the gift of healing, and after people started making you into a celebrity and a hero and a saint, and I'm always saying to the clergy, people say, oh, you're lovely, Father, you're so holy and you're saintly. I said, don't believe a word of them. Don't believe that, because we know, all of us know, there's nobody in the eyes of Jesus that is not special, and there's nobody in the eyes of Jesus that cannot allow Jesus to do the works through him. Pray, yes, there are charisms and gifts, but there's dangers. The healing ministry is a dangerous ministry when you're, especially a lay person, because automatically built into these priests, their ministry, they have the ministry of healing. They are in the person of Christ. But for somebody like me, or some, there's beautiful people, lay people, who pray for healing and miracles happen. But there's a danger that you begin to think, well, it's because of my holiness or it's because I'm so good. Nothing to do with it. You can have gifts of God, and they may cause you to lose your soul because you become proud, you become, arrogant, self-righteous, all these things. But I went to Lourdes at the beginning of this ministry, to a beggar lady, and you know what I wanted? I wanted to stay in the heart of the Catholic Church, because this is our home. And I didn't want to be where the normal, ordinary Catholics or people were looking for something sensational, something, Sister Briege, the healing nun. And so I prayed to Our Lady, and I looked in Lourdes and I saw all these people. I certainly believe that there's a great need for healing, and Jesus wants us to pray for healing, wants us to pray for miracles, wants us to expect miracles. And when I came back is when, I don't have time to tell you the whole story, but there's a book outside called Miracles Do Happen. You can buy it. It's written by Sister Briege McKenna. The whole story's in it from years ago. I wouldn't have time to tell you the whole story. But one of the things that did happen after my trip to Lourdes is that Jesus showed me miracles happening through the Eucharist. The first person I ever saw healed at a Mass was a child in Juarez in Mexico. Since that time, I remember seeing in Singapore a girl who was just finished medical school, had a big accident, broke her back, was paralyzed, and was miraculously healed in the stadium. We had a big Mass for the Catholics, and she was healed. Father Kevin and myself, and now with Father Pablo, we just heard word last week of a woman with cancer in Miami, who, those of you who are listening or who are on live stream, this woman was a church-going person. Because I'm always afraid, that now since COVID, people say to me, I love Mass on Mother Angelica. They don't come to church. They stay and look at it on television. And I tell them, it's like telling your mother, you live 5 doors down from me, but I have a photograph I'm not going to see anymore. Just look at the photograph. That's what it's like. That's what you do to Jesus. If you say to him, I love you, Jesus, but I'm going to sit here in this comfortable armchair and watch you on television. It's an insult. He's alive. He's right here. Well, anyway, so the first story I'm going to tell you happened in Kenya. I was in Kenya some years ago. Father Kevin and myself were giving a priest retreat. And we had 115 priests or something on the retreat. And the bishop came to us and he said, the people would love to have something at the cathedral. Is it possible at the end of the retreat, instead of having the closing Mass for the priest retreat, we'll have it in the cathedral and invite the diocese? Well, as Father Pablo said, those people walked. They came from all over the diocese, Nakuru in Kenya. And in the church, there, they sing the tambourines. There was such an atmosphere of expectancy. And on the altar in the cathedral were all these young and African, Kenyan priests mixed with some of the missionaries and all the people. So at the Eucharistic healing service, which we're going to have now, Father Kevin was holding the monstrance. And I was standing here and I was saying to the people, now this host is Jesus. It's not bread, it's not wine. The substance has changed. And that's the important thing, brothers and sisters. A lot of Catholics, if you say to them, they look at you, you say, it's not bread and wine anymore. The substance, no longer, it looks like it, tastes like, but it's really not. At the consecration, and that has been in the early church, that was clearly explained, because at every heresy that came up, the church in the early would call a council to define and clearly tell the people, no, it's not blessed bread, and no, it's not bread and wine. Transubstantiation means the bread ceases to exist, and the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus. So I was telling the people this. And sitting in the front row was a little boy who was a little Kenyan boy, about 9. And every time I would say, this is Jesus, you ask Jesus now for what you want, he'd get up. And you could see that my words were animating him and getting him all excited. And he was looking at Father Kevin, who was over on one side. And Father Kevin saw him standing, he was clapping his hands, just never moved, just stood up and kept, you could see the desire in this little boy. So Father walked over and he stood right in front of him, and the little boy grabbed the monstrance and brought it down and just kept looking at him and kissed it, and then Father Kevin went on. The little boy started walking around, moving around the sanctuary, nobody there, nobody took any notice, they were all talking to Jesus. At the end, we were in the sacristy, and one of the missionary sisters came into the sacristy and she said, come out and see what's happening. We go out, and I looked around the door, and out in the middle of the sanctuary, in front of the tabernacle, they had the little boy up on a table, and there were all his village, and his parents, all the people who came with him, were dancing and praising God. And what had happened right in front of his uncle, who was one of the concelebrants on the altar, that little boy was born paralyzed. And he was miraculously, instantaneously healed at Mass. They carried him on their back from a village. And he got healed right there and then. So powerful was the effect that the bishops of Kenya asked Father Kevin and myself to come back. So we went back for 2 weeks. And every second day, we went across the country from Nairobi to Mombasa. And we had what is called, we didn't have Mass, we had Mass in different places in churches, but we had what we called Eucharistic crusades. And brothers and sisters, It was beautiful, because here we were as Catholics, and it wasn't some preacher coming that was famous, but they decorated and built a beautiful altar in the middle of these stadiums, and with the flowers, it was beautiful. And then Father Kevin took Jesus around the stadium, and the children throwing flowers, and the beautiful, beautiful faith. And the Archbishop of Nairobi said to us at the end of the whole crusade tour, he said, imagine, we brought you I came from the US, Father Kevin living in Ireland. We brought you to do what? To tell us something we already have. It's like a starving person. And you say, but open the door of the fridge, it's full of food, you can eat it. Well, that's what Catholics, you look at us today, brothers and sisters, and you say, if you, and Father Pablo said it so well, do you really believe this is Jesus? Then why is the Catholic Church, why are Catholic people doing exactly the same as the pagan? Why is it that we as Catholics, if we say we receive Jesus, that he's alive, he's a living person, why are Catholics promoting abortion? Why are Catholics no different than the pagans? Jesus hasn't changed. It said everybody who came to Jesus when he walked the earth, he touched them. See, we make an act of faith. As Catholics, we say we believe, because if you're not a Catholic, why would you be a Catholic? The name doesn't mean it's universal. But if we really believe in Jesus, then we can't possibly be in the state we're in. And that's why you, in Atlanta, why Father Pablo and myself are so thrilled, because we are going through a crisis of faith, and the bishops did call and say that there's going to be 3 years of a revival for the Eucharist, but that is not going to work if out of books or programs. It is going to be when the bishops and when the priests get us into the church to kneel in front of Jesus himself. He's the one that will teach us. And that's what I learned over the years. The second miracle, and that miracle happened to that little boy to bring glory to God. The second one, Jesus doesn't always answer the way we expect. A couple came to me, came to a parish where we were, and the husband was blind. And he had only gotten blind a couple of years. And they came up to ask me to pray for a miracle that he would see. And we prayed, and I told him, I said, ask Jesus at the Eucharist. But during the Mass when I was praying, and they weren't very far from where I was sitting, I got the strongest sense, go over and tell him to go see the doctor, the eye doctor. And they looked at me and said, doctor? The eye doctor? I said, I don't know why I'm telling you, but they said, we don't believe in doctors. And I looked at them and I said, well, I don't know why, but I got this inspiration to tell you, you should go to see a doctor. And the wife said, I can't get him to go. But they went. He had an operation and he got his sight back. He had cataracts or something. God could have healed him instantly. I had the same thing myself. 10 years ago now, since my Golden Jubilee, I was going to have a marvelous time. And just not long before it, I got this wink in my eye. You have a nerve in your eye. And I work with clergy a lot. And it's not good to be winking at them now, And I would get prayed over. I got everybody that I knew had the gift of healer or prayed, and it would get better for a couple of weeks or months. I'd be saying, thank you, Jesus, I'm healed. And about a month later, it would come back worse. And the doctor would say, do you drink a lot of caffeine? Have you got anybody with a twitch in your family? And that's the way it went. I had that for years, a couple of years. And I went to Germany, and my eye took out. And I'm up there in front of them all, and I'm going, And I thought, so I went into the chapel, and Father Pablo mentioned about talking to Jesus. Never be afraid to talk to Jesus. You know, I'm blessed because I live in the convent and we have Jesus in the convent. And so when the sisters are out, I go into the chapel. I talk away to Jesus. And like a dentist said to me one day, I got so mad at Jesus because my only child is sick. And he gave out to Jesus. Then he got very sorry. I said, the best thing, Jesus loves you to treat him like a person. He'll never get mad at you. Because when you talk to him, if you have a burden or you're mad or you're discouraged. But I was really fed up with this eye. Fed up. And I couldn't get any help. And you can't forget your face. So, you know, it's there. So I went into the chapel and I asked Jesus 3 things. I said, Jesus, if you miraculously healed my feet, now an eye couldn't be that hard to heal. Jesus, could you please heal my eye? It's a very big distraction to me. And I said, I just would love a miracle for my eye. But if that's not your will, then would you send me a doctor? Now there must be some doctor out there that knows what's wrong with me, that could maybe help me. And I said, and if that's not your will, I said, then give me the grace to offer it up. You know, people say, offer it up. But I mean, I see people and offering it up, they're as mad as anything, and they're miserable, and everybody else is miserable with them. So that possibly can't be Jesus happy with you because you're just grinning and bearing. But if you say to Jesus, Jesus, I don't want this cancer, I don't want it, but I unite it to you, please give me supernatural strength. You see people, saints, suffering terribly. So that was my last request. And guess what happened? Out from the host came this voice. Go see a neurologist. Go see a neurologist. So I thought, okay. I got up. I meet one of the nuns outside. I was heading for the book to look at the yellow pages, to look to see could I see. And the nun said to me, I said, I'm looking for a neurologist. And she said, oh, because she knew. And she said, who told you that? I said, Jesus, after telling me. So it gets more humorous because I met one of my former students and she was a doctor, and her mom had asked me, because she knew me well, you know, she's an Irish girl, and she said, what's wrong with your eye? And I said, I don't know, but I'm going to the neurologist. Jesus just told me go see a neurologist. So she said, her daughter said, who was a doctor, she said, my classmate's a neurologist in Tampa. You should really, I'll make an appointment. And she did. So I go see the neurologist. And she said, she looked at me, and I didn't have my habit on. I was just in civilian clothes. I said, I'll not tell her. She'll not know anything about me. I'll just go in and see what she's going to say to me. So I go in, and I bring, Father Kevin came with me, and Jackie, my secretary. And anyway, she looked at me and said, I think I know what's wrong with you. And all I said, can you fix me? Can you fix it? She said, well, I'll have to take, as any of you in medicine, some MRI and MRA tests, the brain, and see everything. So she said, come back in 2 days. So 2 days later, I go back to the neurologist. I walk in, and she was a girl probably in her 30s or so, and she said to me, are you in medicine? I said, no. Oh, she said, you must know something about medicine. I said, no, I don't know a thing about what's inside me. I just know I pray for it all. So she said, but how would you know to come to a neurologist? So I'm thinking, what am I going to tell her? So I said to her, and she was convinced that I had some knowledge. I said, well, actually, Jesus told me to come to you. She said, what? Does Jesus know me? And this girl jumped up. She was so excited. She said, Jesus knows me. He told you to come to me? I said, yes, he told me to come to the neurologist, and you're the one. And she said, well, now, the reason I was so puzzled is because she said, yes, there is something wrong. And yes, in the medical profession, we can do something for you. It's critical, but it's possible. She said, there's 2 choices you can have. There's a temporary cure, and you could have it every 3 months, Botox. And I'm thinking, my mother general, I said, Mother, I need $2,000 for Botox every 3 months. I said, oh, Botox, no, I couldn't have that. No, freeze my face or whatever they do. I said, what is the permanent? She said, brain surgery. And I said, okay, I'll have the brain surgery. What's wrong with me? And she said, it's a big long word. I couldn't even pronounce it. She said, inside your brain, a blood vessel and a nerve fused. And the pulsating those of you in the medical profession, wore the skin of the nerve. And it would get worse. It hadn't come to the pain yet, but it's just the nerve. But I would have been in terrible pain. It would have gone down my whole side of my body. So she said, then she proceeds to tell me all about the brain surgery, how they couldn't do laser, they couldn't do keyhole, they couldn't do all. But she said, what we do in Shands Hospital in Florida, there's a wonderful surgeon there, and he's the top man, and he would do it for you. She said, you cut a bone out of your skull, go inside the brain, slit this, and she said, you know, I have to warn you that it's a very, very delicate operation. And you know, brothers and sisters, I was sitting listening to her as if she was talking about somebody else. It didn't take a fidge out of me. But when I went outside after she told me that they would make plans for me to come, you know, and then I'd go to the hospital, I told Father Kevin and Jackie, who's with me for years, and Father Kevin said, are you mad in the head? You're going to have brain surgery for your eye? And everybody was worried. So I go, and I think, you know, I didn't tell my family or I didn't tell many people except my community and a friend of mine and all the close friends. They're all praying. Father Kevin anointed me, and they're all so worried. You know something, brothers and sisters, Jesus can help you to go through the most terrible things that it's like he shielded me from knowing how serious it was. I went in, and I had the surgery, and when I came out, after many hours or whatever, I was put into the recovery room, and while I'm there, then they took me to the room, and I'm lying there, and the nurse is looking at me, and she's saying, what's your name? You know, see, was I coherent, could I talk? And I'm looking up at the ceiling, and I see this writing, beautiful, on a square in the ceiling, and it was written. And I said to the nurse, is that really written up there? Miracles do happen, just believe. And she said, yes. A little boy was healed in this room, and the parents asked permission to paint that on the ceiling. It was the title of my book. And there's 1,100 rooms or whatever there's in Shands, and I was in the room where it was written. I was there for 2 days or so, came home, and my wink was gone. And all I can tell you, brothers and sisters, it would have been much cheaper to get a miracle, but God used the doctors. So that's the second way Jesus heals. Why did he use a neurologist? Why does God give us doctors and nurses? Because he wants to heal us. Why does God give us medicine? Medicine can be used for the wrong reasons. You know, people can overdose people. But I take medicine, my blood pressure and all these things. This is all part of the healing ministry. So don't be thinking like the man with the blind eyes, I don't need the doctor. Sister Briege is praying, I'm going to go to Mass and receive the Eucharist. Yes. But you know, Jesus also, in the pagan world, where people don't even know him through the medical profession, God uses men and women. And this is why I say to doctors and nurses and healthcare people, just like I say to the clergy, woe to you, medical people, when the day comes of general final judgment, and God will look at you that he give his gift of healing, because it is a gift of healing in the medical profession, because you use your brain, your hands, your heart to do wonders for God. But if you misuse them, and think of all the doctors, I know them because I've met and spoken all over the world to doctors, who are using their skills to kill people, to abort children, to do awful things to the human body, to horrible stuff. And I think to myself, if they only knew what a beautiful gift. It's not, sure, you make a living, it's a medical, you know, you get paid, but it doesn't even compare what Jesus does when you consecrate your medical profession to him in your heart, when you do the best you can for God's people. Because as one surgeon said to me one day, I make the Stations of the Cross and I look at the body of Jesus being manhandled and tortured, and I think, I'm going to be in my operating clinic and I'm going to be handling the same body, because Jesus said, we are his body. What you do to me, you do to them. So that's part of the healing ministry. And tonight, as Jesus is walking through this church, I want you to look at Jesus and ask him. And the other thing I would say to you is, there is such a thing as progressive healing. You may not experience, maybe you're praying for some particular intention or a physical healing, or for your children, or for somebody that's not here. Not everything happens like making the coffee instantly. But oftentimes what the Lord will allow to happen is, sometimes we have these needs so that we can keep coming to Jesus. And he doesn't change, it changes us. It's the little boy, like the little boy who had a huge tumor in his brain, and the parents brought him to me. And I said to them, I'll pray and get the child anointed, and they're practicing Catholics, beautiful family. And I said, but every day in your home, pray with little Sean and put your hand as the father, the head of the, and pray for a miracle. Sure, you want Jesus, his will happen. God's perfect will happen. But we don't have to make it up. We just ask him for the miracle, and he will transform us and give us the grace for his will. Little Sean, the tumor grew and grew. And after 7 months, they prayed every day before supper. The kids, before they came in, they all joined around little Sean and laid hands on him. 7 months later, the tumour started shrinking. And the father came to see me when the child was declared clear of cancer, tumour's cancer. And he said, do you know what happened? We never prayed together. We had soccer, we had sports, we were always running. But because it was so desperate for Sean, that we made a decision that we were going to, every evening, the kids before they went out or did their homework, we gathered around Sean. We prayed a decade of the rosary for him, and we laid hands on him. And she said, when Sean got healed, he said, we realised that had Sean been instantly healed, we wouldn't have been a family praying. And he said, now we continue. It has bonded us together. It's like what Father Peyton, the Rosary priest, said, the family that prays together stays together. Doesn't mean you're physically present, but there's a bonding through gathering to pray, praying. And so tonight, as we pray with you, don't get impatient if things don't happen. And whether it's physical, spiritual, mental, emotional. And lastly, I'd say to those of you on live stream, as the healing service is going on, wherever you are, I have seen miracles around the world through FaceTime and Skype during the coronavirus. I ministered all over the world. And the miracles of joy to see these people filled with peace, with healing, with the gift of faith in Jesus. So let's get ready for the Eucharist now as it's put out on the altar. And as Father, look at the host. Don't close. And if it's easier for you to sit, remain sitting, whatever way you're comfortable. But don't bow your head. Look at the sacred host, because Jesus will be 100% present to you. He doesn't see crowds. He sees individuals, and he loves us to look at him, because looking at Jesus in the host is that these are your windows to the soul. These eyes can cause disaster, which is happening through pornography and sin and all the evil of the seductions, but also when we as Catholics look at a sacred host, consecrated host, we are looking at Jesus. We're looking at a person. It's the same Jesus who said to Thomas, you see me, Thomas. Thomas saw him physically. But blessed are those who do not see me and yet believe. That's you and me. So tonight, and whenever you're at Mass, look at the host and remember it is a person and talk to him. And the more you do that, the more he will become alive to you. And you'll realize what Father Pablo was talking about, that you will fall in love with him. You will know that Jesus is the best friend you can have, because he died for you and he's risen for you and he's here. So let's, for in a moment, like Bartimaeus, prepare for Jesus who's coming by, and remember what he'd say to you. What do you want me to do for you? And as Father's walking through the cathedral, I will be praying at the microphone or sitting here and asking Jesus with you for whatever intentions you have. So let's prepare. Let's just in these moments.